The Republican extremists could doom the party to endless defeats for years to come. Republican Senator Rob Portman's retirement announcement caught Washington, D.C. by surprise. Well, not me. It's a good thing he's retiring. Portman, who won re-election in Ohio in 2016 by 21 points, is seemingly not on anyone's radar for any potential retirement anytime soon. Well, this is good news for me, but bad news for the Republicans. Not merely because defending an open seat is more difficult than when an incumbent, especially a popular one like Portman, is running for re-election, but also because the departure of smart conservative workhorses like Portman leaves extreme candidates more likely to win a primary if they win. The party has changed for the worse, and if they lose, those extreme candidates will still tend to define how the Republican Party is perceived, and that perception reflects a long-time trend. 2010 was a great year for supposedly the Republicans, but they gained more than 60 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives and 6 U.S. Senate seats, but 2 congressional candidates, both unsuccessful, planted the seed that Republican candidates were increasingly outlandish in their performance and beliefs, and that seed grew. In Delaware, Christine O'Donnell, a Tea Party-backed Republican Senate candidate, was forced to go into defensive in an effort to explain her earlier remarks about dabbing into witchcraft. Instead of focusing her attacks on her opponent, who was Democrat Chris Coons, she was running an infamous and that began that I am not. She began an infamous ad that began with "I am not a witch." But meanwhile, in Nevada, Tea Party the Tea Party supported Sharon Angle emerged from a crowded GOP field only to have her campaign against a potentially beatable Democrat, Harry Reid, sidetracked with her strange claims that some American cities were governed by Sharia law, meaning Islamic religious law, and her avoidance of the press in part because of her odd statements. In 2012, Missouri Republican Senate candidate Todd Akin, a candidate running against a vulnerable Democrat Claire McCaskill, had found himself on the defensive over comments about women's bodies supposedly blocking pregnancy after what he called legitimate rape. Akin apologized but later unapologized, and McCaskill won the election by 15 points. Aiken practically had an ideological soulmate in Indiana's GOP Senate nominee, Richard Murdoch, who, in addition to questioning the constitutionality of Medicare and Social Security, popular programs among seniors, the most reliable of voting blocs, also made controversial comments about abortion. Specifically, he basically said that the invisible ferryman intended rape pregnancies. I doubt that. The Murdoch later apologized for the misinterpretation of his comments, but the damage was already done. And another blown opportunity for Republicans, Democrat Joe Donnelly won that particular election. What these candidates all have in common is not simply costing the GOP winnable U.S. Senate seats; it's that they began to define the party in the run-up to former squatter Donald Trump's rise in 2010. O'Donnell became a household name and laughingstock. In 2012, Republican candidates throughout the country were taken off their messages as Democrats effectively nationalized the Aiken and Murdoch comments, causing Republicans yet more problems with the women voters. While these candidates shared a willingness to stoke anger and use fiery rhetoric, they did not have Trump's command of media or ability to dominate that political conversation. Which brings us back to the Portman retirement. Along with Portman, Senators Richard Burr and Pat Toomey are retiring in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, respectively. And Arizona Governor Doug Ducey says he won't run for U.S. Senate in 2022, so it's possible that Republicans might nominate the Trump loyalist, Representative Jim Jordan, to replace Portman and Lara Trump. Yeah, nobody really wants either one of those two either. Trump's daughter-in-law to replace Burr, which is what Lara Trump is, and she's a dumbass anyway. Meanwhile, the Arizona Republican Party chair, Kelly Ward, another Trump supporter, or sycophant basically is what I would like to call that, but she may run in the U.S. Senate race in Arizona, in which Democrat Mark Kelly will be up for re-election. But not to mention that Trump's former press secretary, the fat ass Sarah Sanders, announced Monday that she was running for governor of Arkansas, and she won't win anyway. And she received the former squatter's endorsement shortly after. Win or lose, and to be clear, Ward, who has already lost 2 Republican primaries, will certainly lose again, and these candidates would further define the GOP as the party of Trump, even as the former squatter's popularity has dropped following the insurrection that he inspired. And for the Republicans who hope to put Trump in the rearview mirror, this could spell disaster. State parties may not care, but indeed by attacking fellow Republicans, party officials in places like Arizona, Oregon, and Virginia scare away potential moderate Republican voters who do not subscribe to Trumpism, though censor Even though censor and resolutions, these officials seek to cast out any Republican that they view as not sufficiently loyal to the former squatter. And this was misguided. This was misguided enough during the Trump years. Traditionally, parties have believed it is important to grow their base, but not shrink it through loyalty tests. But as the GOP continues to go further down the road of tribalism, mistaken Trumpian tactics, and controversy for long-term strategy, they will risk further electoral and policy losses.